From earlier today.
I heard a bunch of what appeared to be shots. Pow, 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 pow.
It was at least, they said, about 50 shots.
The officers received fire from a suspect, and they returned fire.
And I heard the police saying to the gunman, I don't know if it's like, get down or put your gun down.
A lot of us dove into the dugout.
So the Republican whip, Steve Scalise, several others wounded. The gunman is dead. In a moment, the investigation and the race to figure out a motive this afternoon. You will hear from those who were there during a blood-soaked morning on a baseball diamond in the state of Virginia. I'm Bill Hemmer in today for Shepard Smith. Good afternoon, everyone. Amateur video has captured dramatic audio from the shooting targeting Republican lawmakers practicing for a charity baseball game in Virginia earlier today. What you're about to see is 2 minutes of unedited video of the scene. This is the first time we have seen and heard this angle. Here it is now for the first time.
Do we know where he's at? Do we know where he's at?
He's behind home plate. You call 911?
I assume people have been calling 911 already. Hey, is that guy okay out there? The guy been shot. Is he okay? Is anybody talking to him?
Stay down! Stay down! Stay down!
He's behind home plate. That was Noah Nathan, the photographer there. We assume he lives in the area. Says he was walking his dogs this morning. And remember, this all happened a little bit after 7 o'clock this morning. Meanwhile, we're learning the shooter was a Bernie Sanders supporter who repeatedly slammed President Donald Trump and Republicans on social media. That's all according to investigators who found his Facebook page with the suspect's name on it earlier. All of that confirmed. A source also confirming to Fox News that the gunman was James Hodkinson's home inspector, Belleville, Illinois, which is just east of St. Louis, Missouri. President Trump says the suspect died after a shootout with security officers. Witnesses say the suspect asked the lawmakers if they were Republicans or Democrats on the field, then opened fire, spraying the area with bullets for up to 10 minutes in length. Happened this morning at a park in Alexandria, Virginia, 10 miles south of Washington, D.C. Officials say the gunman shot and wounded several people, including Majority Whip Steve Scalise and a Capitol police officer who was part of his security detail. Video shows first responders carrying the Louisiana congressman to an ambulance on a stretcher. Witnesses say those security officers sprang into action, firing on the suspect as people ran for their lives.
I heard a bunch of what appeared to be shots. Pow, 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 pow. Seemed to be like return fire. Pow, 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 pow. I bet you there were 30 to 50 shots that I heard.
That's one witness. Another witness saying that he was across the street at the YMCA when he saw the shootout between the gunman and the security officers with the congressman.
He was crouched behind a wooden structure, exchanging fire with what I believe to be police officers who were hiding behind a black SUV. One was shooting over the engine block. Another was lying down behind the SUV. I believe one of the police officers' rounds passed through the YMCA windows. 2 rounds hit the windows. One went through and landed in the pool. Another lodged between 2 panes of glass.
Republican Senator Rand Paul, he was at the baseball practice telling Fox News earlier live today that the shooting would have been a bloodbath if the security detail had not been there to protect the majority leader whip, Steve Scalise, the number 3 House Republican.
One of the staffers quickly climbed in about 2 seconds, climbed the 20-foot fence, hopped down beside me, and we're behind the tree. Still gunshots are, ringing out. Representative Scalise goes down. We can see him, but we can't get to him because really nobody could get to him until the gunman was brought down. There's probably 5 or 10 congressmen hunkering down in the first base dugout. The gunman's in behind the third base dugout. I do believe that without the Capitol Hill police, it would have been a massacre. We had no defense.
Senator,
we had no defense.
Senator,
we had no defense at all.
And on it went. Republican Congressman Rodney Davis out of Illinois spoke with me a bit earlier today in America's Newsroom, and he says he was at bat when the shooting began and blamed the violence on the heated rhetoric of America's political climate.
This is what we have to do. We have to bind together as Americans, not as Republicans and Democrats, to come together and say this type of activity cannot and will not stand, and we can govern together.
Have you spoken with your family, sir?
I did. I called my wife and my children immediately when I got a hold of a phone, because my phone's still hanging in a bag in a crime scene.
Even though you have these teams with dozens of players,
what'd you tell them?
Come out. We have seen
I told them I love you.
Justices coming to these
and
games.
Dad's okay.
A lot of reaction on that earlier today. President Trump came out about 11:30 Eastern Time, spoke out against the shooting and praised the heroic officers and said Americans are strongest when we are unified.
We may have our differences, but we do well in times like these to remember that everyone who serves in our nation's capital is here because, above all, they love our country.
Former Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders also weighing on this, condemning the shooting. The senator out of Vermont saying the suspect had apparently volunteered for his campaign last year.
I am sickened by this despicable act, and let me be as clear as I can be. Violence of any kind is unacceptable in our society, and I condemn this action in the strongest possible terms.
So we have Team Fox coverage now. We'll speak with lawmakers in a moment here. They were at the practice today, and their firsthand accounts are riveting. Michigan Congressman Jack Bergman, a Republican, retired 3-star Marine Corps Lieutenant General, says he was next in line at bat when the first shot rang out. Then he heard another and another, and that's when he says he went into Marine mode. The Congressman, Bergman, is with me now, and sir, it's great to see you. What a day it was.
Yes, what a day it has been, and I would just start by saying, please remember and keep those wounded in your thoughts and prayers.
No question. Tell us what you experienced today.
Well, as you said, shot 1, what's that? Shot 2, we're in a firefight. Shot 3, it's in Marine mode, and everybody's scrambling for cover to try to get out of the line of fire. It was evident that the shooter was behind the third base dugout, so we had to get ourselves out of his line of fire. Unfortunately, those who were in third base, shortstop, and second base positions were directly in the line of fire at the beginning. But as he took a pause in his shots, it appears as though he began to move down the baseline, if you will, outside the field, moving towards home plate, which would put those of us who were behind the dugout in a clear line of fire. So once at that point, the Capitol Police were engaging him, and those of us behind the dugout were able to scramble into the dugout until the Capitol Police have taken him down.
Two questions. How many people are on the field around this time? You have a number?
There's about 25 people, congressmen and staff and other folks who were there for baseball.
Okay, so what happens then if those officers of that security detail is not present on that field?
Bottom line is, I believe as Senator Paul said in an earlier interview, it would have been a massacre. Well, our only option would have been to defend with baseball bats.
You spoke about an hour ago and said the media is complicit in the unity of America.
Well,
what did you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that everybody's got a dog in this fight, whether they want to or not. I was an airline pilot before I changed careers in life, and on 9/11, our lives as aircrew changed forever. And I would suggest to you the rest of the world, because of what they did for a living or how they lived their lives, didn't have to face that new threat like airline crews did. So when we look at the evolving threat to this country, both within and without, nobody can sit at home anymore and just say, well, we'll let the other guys handle it. And what I mean by the media is that it's important to report the news, but we have to be very careful that no matter what the subject is, we don't incite people like the perpetrator today to acts of violence, because we're better than that. And this is an opportunity for us as a country to come together, whether it be the president, the media, the Congress, the general public, to have that discussion as to what we're going to do going forward, because this can't continue.
Just one last point on that. You used the word incite. Is there any evidence that he reacted as a result of the media?
Don't know.
Just when you use the word the media is inciting others, just define that to be clear, sir.
Choose your words carefully when you're reporting news. It was very interesting to stand here on the front end and listen to that tape the first time I'd heard the recording of today's events. That had a profound effect on me.
How come?
Because it did. I was there.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your service. He's a Marine and a member of Congress, Jack Bergman, the Republican from Michigan. Ahead in a moment, we'll go live to the hospital for an update on the survivors of today's attack and how Steve Scalise is doing at this hour. Also today, we'll bring you new details on the shooter from our Chief Intelligence Correspondent, Catherine Herridge, who always chooses her words with care.
We heard a loud bang, and I stopped and said, what was that? And the next thing I heard was everybody said, run, he's got a gun. And we all ran into the dugout and then dispersed from there. Thoughts and prayers are with Steve Scalise, the staffers, and those who were injured. And I got to tell you, it would have been a lot worse without Steve Scalise's detail. Those Capitol policemen are heroes.
Powerful segment there with Rodney Davis early in America's Newsroom, a Republican from Illinois, and detailing his experience and also his conversation with his family back home in Illinois. New details on the shooter now to Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge live in Washington to fill us in on what she is learning this hour. And Catherine, good afternoon.
Well, thank you, Bill. The New York Times interviewing the suspect's brother, who says the 66-year-old was upset over the election of President Trump, and telling the newspaper that he had gone to Washington, D.C. within the last few weeks to protest. This account appears to be consistent with that of a neighbor reporting that they had not seen Hodgkinson in months, though his wife is still at the family home in Illinois. The FBI, the lead investigative body on the case, is at his home at this hour in Belleville with a man who identifies as a friend describing Hodgkinson.
I mean, he was in a few fights and stuff like that, but nothing that would demonstrate violence as far as what he did.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Like fights with people?
Well, he'd never back down from anybody. In a bar fight or whatever, he stood his ground.
But it was that kind of kid stuff, or was it political?
No, it was something that most guys do.
When's the last time had nothing to do with politics?
No, it never had nothing.
Right?
No.
A local TV crew is also reporting that the suspect had contact with police back in March after using a high-powered rifle for target practice on his property bill.
What about the gunman's writings, Catherine? What are we learning through those now?
Well, an Illinois paper is reporting that the suspect sent letters to the editor 5 years ago, and in the letters he railed against Republicans and tax policies. In this August 2012 letter, Hodgkinson apparently advocated for raising taxes on top earners to 60%. It reads in part, "I never said life sucks," he wrote, "only the policies of the Republicans' bill."
Catherine, the motive, what can we say at this moment?
Well, law enforcement source telling Fox News that the FBI steps in when police officers and members of Congress are assaulted. And this morning they really offered no specifics on motive or whether there was a threat reported.
We had no prior information that would lead us to believe that anything like this was going to occur. We just tell you from Virginia's perspective, we monitor all this. We had no threats before.
Are you certain members of Congress were being targeted, though? Was this an intentional attack on members?
Too early to tell if they were targeted or not.
Former mayor of Alexandria, Virginia, where the shooting took place, tells the Washington Post a short time ago that he had talked to the suspect at the Y that's across the street nearly every morning and that he was homeless, keeping all of his belongings, Bill, in a gym bag.
Wow, more to come on that. Catherine Harris, thank you reporting there
You're
in
welcome.
Washington. Today's shooting happened only a few miles from the U.S. Capitol, and members there clearly shaken by the attack against some of their own. Now, Democrats and Republicans standing together to condemn the shooting and lend strength and support to the survivors. We'll get an update on that. Also, we'll go live to the hospital, too, and let you know what we are learning on the condition of all. That's coming up next live.
The shooter was not on the field and never got on the field. He stayed behind the third base dugout and came around behind home plate, got behind the utility shed, and then darted out in front of the utility shed, and that's when he got shot.
Did you see the shooter and the weapon?
I did not until after the fact. I was getting down, protecting, making sure my son was down.
So that is Joe Barton, the Republican out of Texas. He will be in front of the cameras any moment now with his Democratic counterpart to talk about the charity game tomorrow night. So we're waiting on that out of Washington as well at this hour. Arizona Senator Jeff Flake said he and his fellow Republicans this morning were sitting ducks on that baseball field when a gunman opened fire during practice. Flake came on TV almost immediately, describing the moment when he was able to reach the injured House Majority Whip, Steve Scalise.
He was laying motionless out there, and so I wanted to get to him, but there were still shots going overhead from both sides. And so finally, when we heard that the shooter was down, I just ran low out to Steve and started putting pressure on the wound. And then we, for about 10 or 15 minutes, did that until the medics arrived.
Senator Flake also saying that Congressman Scalise had been playing second base. He dragged himself off the field about 15 yards after the gunman shot him and left a trail of blood behind, as you hear. Alabama Congressman Mo Brooks, also on scene, said that Scalise left that trail of blood in the outfield. Peter Ducey live at George Washington University Hospital. That's in D.C. Now the victims and the updates are what this hour, Peter? What can we say?
Bill, at this hospital, we can say from officials that there were 2 patients brought in from Alexandria sometime in the 9 o'clock hour or thereabout. And officials tell us that one of those patients has now passed away and the other one remains in critical condition. But they will not say officially at this hospital which patient passed away, if it was the gunman or if it was one of his victims. What we do have confirmed as of just a few minutes ago, the House Majority Whip Steve Scalise is still in critical condition, but he's out of surgery at MedStar Hospital for that gunshot wound to his hip. He was apparently in good spirits ahead of that surgery and well enough at the time to speak to his wife. One of the other victims of this morning's attack in Virginia, Matt Micah, works for Tyson Foods as the Director of Government Relations. He is also in critical condition with multiple gunshot wounds. That's according to the Micah family, which did just say in a statement they are on their way here from Michigan to be with him. Now, one of the heroic Capitol police officers who was hurt, David Bailey, did not get shot. He is expected to be okay. And the other, Crystal Griner, was shot in the leg or foot, but is also expected to recover as well. Another gunshot victim, Zach Barth, works for Texas Congressman Roger Williams. That congressman said that Barth is doing well and is expected to recover too.
Give us a sense of the scene at that hospital where you have been for some time, Peter.
Bill, when I got here just a few minutes after the paramedics from Alexandria came out of the hospital, they were actually just right here on New Hampshire Avenue, the backside by the entrance to the emergency room, cleaning blood off of a stretcher that they had used to bring one of the patients here, just doing it right in the middle of the street on the backside. On the other side, the front of the hospital, I walked around and there were already vehicles marked FBI here on official business doing some sort of investigation, but we never did notice a major uptick in security at this location in terms of a flurry of activity. The most of that came within the last hour or so when two black SUVs with U.S. government plates pulled right up in here where the ambulances normally pull up and leave, but we still have not been able to figure out who went inside.
Peter,
Bill.
thank you. We'll be back with you when we get more developments from there. Peter Ducey at the hospital. Lawmakers on the Hill, meanwhile, calling for unity after this shooting this morning, and Democrats who are also practicing together in a dugout to pray for their Republican colleagues. In fact, Ruben Kihuen, Democratic congressman of Nevada, posting this picture on social media that has gone viral since. Mike Emanuel now live on the Hill, talking to many folks there. And Mike, good afternoon. What are you hearing?
Well, Bill, those lawmakers who are on the baseball field this morning actually seem understandably shaken up. They were in their baseball gear preparing for an annual charity baseball event tomorrow night, which could raise in excess of $600,000 for local boys and girls clubs, also a literacy group. After the event, after all the tragedy and the shock wore off, there was a bipartisan call for unity.
We are united. We are united in our shock. We are united in our anguish. An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us.
To my colleagues, you're going to hear me say something you've never heard me say before. I identify myself with the remarks of the Speaker. We are not one caucus or the other in this House today, but we speak for each other in saying that we send our thoughts and prayers to our colleague, Steve Scalise.
These are very polarized times here on Capitol Hill and really across Washington. You get a sense after seeing an incident like this, it's giving everybody a chance to pause and think about the rhetoric that's going around here on Capitol Hill. Senator Bernie Sanders was identified that the gunman was a supporter, a volunteer of his presidential campaign. When he learned that, he quickly went to the Senate floor to condemn the violence. He also praised the heroes and prayed for a quick and full recovery of the members of Congress, the staffers, and also the law enforcement officials. Still plenty of shock here on Capitol Hill, Bill.
Let's hope they play that game tomorrow night. Let's hope it's televised, too. And they raise even more money than ever before. Right. Thank you, Mike. Mike Emanuel there on Capitol Hill. Much more coming up on what we're learning in the attack in Virginia. First, though, there are other big stories making news today. This horrifying scene in London. Searchers are looking for more victims after a towering inferno overnight. Officials warn the number of those killed will probably go even higher now. Plus, we are on verdict watch at this hour in Pennsylvania. There's a jury debating the fate of the comic legend Bill Cosby as we await news from the jurors in southeastern Pennsylvania. Here's a live look at the scene on Capitol Hill. We await lawmakers, Republican and Democrat, the captains of each team, the managers, you could say, to give us a preview of what will happen tomorrow evening. So when they get together with that, you'll see it live. Break here.
Congressman Scalise is a friend, and a very good friend. He's a patriot, and he's a fighter. He will recover from this assault. And Steve, I want you to know that you have the prayers not only of the entire city behind you, but of an entire nation and, frankly, the entire world.
That from earlier today. I want to go straight to the White House right now. North Lawn Chief White House correspondent John Roberts with the news on what he is getting at this hour. John, hello.
Hey, good afternoon to you, Bill. You know, the president spent a lot of time today on the telephone. One of the people he called was Jennifer Scalise, the wife of Steve Scalise, the House Majority Whip. Also called Scalise's chief of staff, some other members of Congress. And the president gave that address from the diplomatic reception room just before noon today, in which he said that his thoughts and prayers are with the victims of today's shooting and their families, of course, but also giving high praise for the heroic actions of the two Capitol Police officers who really put their lives on the line here to protect those members of Congress and the other people who were there today. The president, all during the campaign and again as president, repeated over and over again his high praise for the men and women of law enforcement who do take those actions every day, laying their lives on the line to protect the people of this country. And that's what the president did again today. Listen here.
Many lives would have been lost if not for the heroic actions of the two Capitol Police officers who took down the gunman despite sustaining gunshot wounds during a very, very brutal assault. Melania and I are grateful for their heroism and praying for the swift recovery of all victims.
You know, Senator Rand Paul has said that because of the fencing there, that whole playing field could have turned into a killing field if it were not for the heroic actions of those two police officers. And you played the video at the top, Bill. You know how many shots the gunman got off before you heard the reports of the handguns coming back from the Capitol Police. He could have done an awful lot of damage with that rifle.
For a long, long time. You're right, John. The president also talked about the political discourse in the country today. How did he address that?
Yeah, he didn't talk about it in the stark terms that, say, Congressman Rodney Davis did. And you played his comments earlier saying that we have to do something to lower the temperature, to lower the vitriolic nature of much of the political rhetoric out there. He went so far as to call it political rhetorical terrorism. I saw the interview, Bill, you did with him earlier today. The president didn't really get that much into the political environment, but he did urge unity across the country in the wake of this. Listen here.
We can all agree that we are blessed to be Americans, that our children deserve to grow up in a nation of safety and peace, and that we are strongest when we are unified and when we work together for the common good.
In the wake of the shooting, the president canceled his public schedule today. He had an event over at the Labor Department regarding apprenticeships. We don't know when that event will be rescheduled to, but we do expect the president will resume his regular schedule tomorrow. All right, Bill?
John, thank you. John Roberts in the North Lawn, the White House there. Let's go up Pennsylvania Avenue, bring in a congressman who was there this morning earlier today, Republican Mike Bishop out of Michigan. You say you felt like you were being hunted today.
Yes, unfortunately.
Share us your experience.
Well, we were locked in a cage. The way this was set up was you had a chain link fence around the entire field. This shooter had a direct shot at us, all of us on the field. We had no cover whatsoever. He could have, based on the amount of ammo he had, could have taken out each and every one of us. And the only reason why I'm standing here today and why my other colleagues are here today is because of the heroics of the Capitol Police, Scalise's detail, who did beyond anybody's comprehension of heroic activity today to try and make sure that we were safe.
Yeah, we led this hour with brand new video and audio of what I think it was 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Honestly, it felt like a lot longer than that. Of just a repeated gunfire. And that was clearly your experience also, sir.
It was, and it seemed like an eternity, and I don't know how many shots were fired. They asked me that question too, but he seemed to be able, as I watched him, because when I hit the ground first, I saw him directly, and I watched him very methodically with the weapon, and the way he would point, focus, shoot, put it down for a second, look for someone else, point, focus, shoot, and that was double tapping the whole time and firing over our heads. And I was doing the best I can to try and get out of harm's way, but bullets all over the place, spraying all over the place, hitting the chain link fence. That ting, 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 ting sound will forever emanate in my mind.
So you were able to see the shooter then from behind third base dugout?
Well, he was right next to us. There was no way you couldn't see him, and particularly when he started shooting his weapon, this was clearly a rifle and a high-power rifle at that.
Ron DeSantis, a colleague from Florida, said that he saw an individual there at the field and asked the question, are you Republicans or Democrats? Have you heard that accounting, and can you add anything to that?
Well, I have heard the accounting, but I can't add anything to it because I was not there. I was actually on the field, so I didn't encounter this person at all. I don't know what that exchange was all about.
What about the game tomorrow night? We're about to get a press conference here. Joe Barton, Texas, your colleague Mike Doyle from Pennsylvania. They're the managers for each team. Does the game change at all?
Well, clearly we're going to have a different mindset. There's no question about it. But this game is really important every year. We raise close to $1 million for children's charities in the area. And, you know, the game must go on. The victims of this terrible tragedy today would expect it to go on. I'm sure Steve Scalise would expect it to go on. My heart prayer goes to those that have been injured today. In particular, my fellow Michigander, Matt Micah, who was grievously wounded, and he's still in surgery now. And I can't tell you how much my heart goes out to him.
Are you able to update our viewers on his condition?
I'm not. The last I heard, he was in surgery and in critical condition and with multiple gunshot wounds to the chest. I saw him right there when I was during this whole thing, and it was very clear he was hurt very badly.
Yeah, we're hearing from the hospital that he's out of surgery, but certainly that does not end the prayers for him and his family and colleagues like yourself. You say you raise $1 million at this baseball game? That's extraordinary.
Well, it is.
Maybe tomorrow night, sir, maybe tomorrow night you can raise $2 million. Let's get that done.
That's, you know, see, that would be a great thing for the media to do, to come out and support this charity baseball game and maybe raise some money on behalf of these victims and really on behalf of America and bringing this country together.
Sir, thank you. Mike Bishop, the Republican from Michigan, appreciate your time. Good to know you're okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
More in a moment here on today's shooting. Our senior producer for Capitol Hill, Chad Pergram, was first to report the attack earlier today. He was there only moments after it happened, and he will share his story as our coverage continues live. Next.
My first thoughts go to the heroism of the Capitol Police that were there and responded immediately in a manner that likely saved the lives of a number of people. Steve Scalise is a member of leadership. He has a security detail.